Welcome to Trumpland, where if you're not a straight, white, able-bodied male, you're a lesser citizen and make this nation worse.
I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Serious? Coming up.
Somebody's coming up. Somebody's serious.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. A month or so ago, I put out a video saying that I hoped that Donald Trump in his second administration would prove me wrong. And that was a sincere hope, because if Donald Trump is the type of president I think he will be, it will be worse for everyone. So I hoped he would prove me wrong. But here we are, 2 weeks into his new administration, and he has done nothing to do anything but prove me right. A great example of that is the events of this week. 2 nights ago, an Army helicopter and a civilian aircraft from American Airlines collided. No one knows why. No one knows what the exact circumstances truly were yet. There's still an investigation underway. But that didn't stop Donald Trump from coming out and telling everyone what he thought the problem was. Diversity was the problem. He says that it's common sense that it's diversity that is to blame.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Since we're talking about common sense, I can only assume he's basing this on what was known by everyone at that point, and that is that the pilot of the helicopter was a straight white male, and at least one of the pilots of the plane was a straight white male. So common sense tells Donald Trump that the only thing that could have caused this collision is diversity amongst the FAA. Since we don't know who the FAA controller was that night, he's able to fill in the blanks with whatever he wants, and he has decided that common sense says the problem must have been a diversity hire at the FAA. That's not common sense. Common sense says, shut the fuck up until you have information as to what happened. This is bigotry writ large. There's no way else to describe it. He has limited information, and he's chosen to fill in the gaps of his information with a negative bias toward a person of color, of different national origin, gender, physical ability, or something. People get upset when I say that Donald Trump is a racist or a bigot in some way. And I get that, since no one knows what someone's internal drive is. No one knows what their actual thoughts are. We can only go by what they say and what they do. And since Donald Trump has been known to associate with people of color his entire life, or at least in his public life, people just assume that he must not have any bigotry. I get that. But I also go by what he says and what he does in other parts of his life, and when he's trying to promote himself or his agenda or appeal to voters. He uses bigotry. Whether or not that bigotry is inherent in him doesn't matter. He's appealing to bigotry and to bigots in order to further himself. That's worse if you're not an actual bigot. I get it if a bigot says bigot things, but if someone who isn't yet chooses to appeal to the bigotry of others in order to further themselves, that's heinous in a whole other way. And it's a clear message. It's a clear message to all Americans that aren't straight white men. You are lesser. You make things worse in this country. If you have a job of any type of authority or any type of safety or overseeing of anyone else, and you are not a straight white male, you didn't earn it. You took that job from some straight white male who was better than you, because there is always a straight white male who is better than you and more deserving of the position. That is the message. According to Donald Trump, that's just common sense. And this is why I say he's a horrible leader. This is why I say anybody can lead this country if things are going well. You know, if you're on a road and that's straight and there's no obstructions and the weather is great, anyone can get behind the wheel and just drive along. Anybody. You can put a 10-year-old who's never driven before and say, hey, this is what you do. You hold the wheel like this, you keep it straight, you put your foot here, and then you go forward. That's all you need to do. Anybody can lead this country if things are going well. There are people who have been at their jobs for decades, and they know what to do in the country. We saw that with the first Trump administration, which all of you talk about with such revelry. Obama left this country in a really good spot. And Trump drove the country just fine as long as everything was going well. And then when something bad happened, when something jumped out into the middle of the road, in this case, for him, it was COVID, he showed he didn't know how to lead, that he was terrible at it. When COVID happened, he was constantly going out and giving conflicting information, scaring the American people with wild speculation of things and undermining the people around him because he did not want to take responsibility for himself. Now, the last time for him, that didn't happen until 3+ years into his presidency. But this time we are less than 2 weeks in, and he's already shown that in a national event, a terrible tragedy, a crisis, a small one comparatively, but even in this small crisis, he cannot lead. He can't take responsibility. He has blamed others immediately. Now, I'm not saying it's his fault. A lot of people have gone online and said, well, he did this with the FAA, he did this, and he didn't do that. You know, there's no proof. I'm not going to say it wasn't his fault because I don't have any information that says this accident happened as a result of something he did. No evidence of that, so I'm not going to say it is. But there's also no evidence that this accident happened because of Biden's policies or Obama's policies or diversity at all. He blames the Obama and Biden administrations for whatever policies that were at the FAA that caused the diversity that caused this accident, completely overlooking the fact that any policy that Obama might have put in place, Trump kept when he was the president. And that's the fact of the matter. The same language that's in the FAA publications about, it's talking about hiring people with disabilities, was part of the FAA policy literally for decades, well before Obama. And it was a policy when Trump was president too. But he can't be held responsible, though those other presidents should. That's the President of the United States. He's gone out and pointed the finger at everyone and said, you vulnerable people, you know, someone with disabilities, somebody, you know, who maybe couldn't hear very well or had limited vision or had English as a second language or a person of color somehow, you got this job. And obviously they weren't good enough and took the job from someone who should have not been overlooked. So the problem is that there wasn't a white, able-bodied man at the wheel at the air traffic control, according to Trump. I mean, what else am I supposed to infer from when he says, quote, the FAA, quote, determined that the workforce was too white, and we want people that are competent, end of quote. Sounds like he's saying that if a white person had been there, it would have been fine, without knowing whether or not there was one. But he has decided to tell everyone that it's those people. They shouldn't have had important jobs. And to all of you people of these vulnerable, underrepresented classes, all my black and brown brothers out there, all my gay allies out there, all of you who voted for Trump because of grocery prices or because of Ukraine or because of Gaza. Yeah, look how that's going. He says that you are undeserving. You are taking your position, your progress from straight white men who are better than you. In a moment of crisis, this is what our leader does. This is one of my biggest problems with Trump as president. He cannot lead in a moment of crisis. He cannot take responsibility. He can't give good information. He's incapable of waiting for proper information and telling the American people that an investigation is underway and not speculating and being divisive. He's incapable because he's not a leader. He may be in charge, but he's not a leader.
And the Shogun is the master. Why don't you sit down and shut up? Why don't I sit down and what? I said, why don't you sit down and shut up? Why don't anybody who wants me to sit down and shut up come down here and make me?
I can't hear you.